Roman Travers, Magic Talk.
One of the good people of this world has to be Harold Hillman, who's a regular contributor here on the Sunday Cafe. He's an executive coach and joins me now. Happy Christmas to you, Harold.
Merry Christmas to you, Roman. You're very kind.
Are you used to having a non-white Christmas? What I mean by that is not snow. It's not snowing anywhere, really, is it? It's something we always have on our cards. Yeah.
Yeah, after 17 years living here, trust me, I much prefer Christmas in shorts and jandals and, just being outside and letting the sun soak in.
Yeah, 2020, Harold, it's been an absolute shit of a year, really, hasn't it? Let's be honest.
It has. Look, there's a few things I've observed. One is that people are ready for the end of the year. A lot of people are just outright exhausted. And you can sort of track that in terms of, back in February and March, around those initial surges of adrenaline that had us very focused. It almost felt like an adventure ride to a certain extent. And then across the year, that vulnerability, that anxiety would have been more subliminal, even as we got our numbers under control here. The reality is that for most businesses, most workplaces, there was direct impact, including some people who lost their jobs and really struggled around finances. And so the whole notion of that sense of vulnerability and anxiety has resulted in fatigue, what people are describing as being flat, which is also, another way of saying mild depression. Just people need to replenish, and so the holiday has come at the right time, where many people are just looking forward to detaching, spending time with family, etc. There's also been an uptick in empathy. Which is a real thing, has become a real thing for everyone. If empathy was more hypothetical and conceptual in 2019, it became real in 2020 because each of us, none of us had a playbook, which meant that we had to build it as we went along. And there's just that natural sense of people being on a learning curve together. A result of that, Roman, is that teams actually became tighter. It actually helps sometimes when you all share that sense of vulnerability in terms of trying to work through some things. But most importantly around the empathy factor is that most senior leaders now no longer question the value of working from home. They did it. They were very efficient and productive, and that will become part of the new normal in businesses.
I think you're right. I think commercial real estate's in real trouble in various parts of the country. What have you observed with the leadership of the companies that you're involved with across this year?
I've been very impressed. It is helpful for leaders to render themselves a bit vulnerable and not be supermen or superwomen. And that is when you are building the playbook, you're more likely to include your team along with that. So it has been more connecting than disconnecting. I have found that many of the teams that I've worked with have actually gotten stronger in terms of that connection. And I will comment on the hybrid, the model in terms of virtual work. Virtual working is now real. The genie is out of the bottle, and you're not going to put that genie back in. And there appears to be two hybrid models emerging. One is people working from home on Mondays and Fridays, and then in the office midweek. And then the other model is people into the office on Monday and Friday and working from home midweek. There seems to be two different trends that are emerging, but either way, a hybrid between physical and virtue has become real, and most companies are flexing far more so than they did even a year ago, but requiring people to come in because there's a need for human and social connection.
My take on the whole year, it's basically been, well, let's put it this way, like being at Rainbow Springs, hanging on to a ride that you hate. You just hold on and hope that you get to the end. What are some of the important questions that we need to ask ourselves looking back on the year?
Yeah, Roman, I love that analogy. I've used that analogy as well. It has felt like we were all led into an amusement park, blindfolded, and then put on this ride, and then we took the blindfolds off, and we're now coming to the end of the ride. So Looking back, it is important. Even post in a pre-COVID world, it's pretty typical in December to just reflect back. People should really take some time to ponder the year and what they've learned. A few questions: what's the most important lesson you learned this year? And there will be many in this COVID year. What's the best thing that happened this year? It's really important to, even in the midst of a lot of uncertainty and angst and those types of things, there will have been some upsides, and it's important to focus on that. What are you most proud of? What challenges did you overcome? And there would have been many in that regard there. In other words, to put the year in perspective, each of us will have been stretched, some of us way out of our comfort zone, and for many of us, it was actually a growth zone. And so it's important to take a look back to determine that you really have, in many respects, people really have grown from this and have new insight, perspective, and wisdom.
I got in trouble because of the time zone difference between New Zealand and Australia. A lot of the hideous, toxic WebEx meetings that we had throughout the year were at times to suit Australia. So I got in trouble because I put on the apron, get into the kitchen, turn the camera around and just get on with life. But in the end, they commended that and they said, well, look, if that works for you, that works for you. What are some of the things we need to plan for or look for in 2021? What I'm saying here, Harold, is that we go through catastrophes and we say, I'm going to surf more, run more, hug trees more, and then we just get on with life and life goes back to normal.
Yeah, I am really looking forward to seeing whether or not people commit to some things that they believed were going to be fundamentally different next year based on this year. For example, relationships, more time with family, more time for yourself, in that sense of people who used to spend 3 hours back and forth in rush hour traffic, now working a bit more flexibly, being more compassionate with themselves to just free up a little bit of time. We can absolutely do that. And so what I would just encourage your listeners to consider in looking ahead is think about your intentions for next year. Be purposeful and deliberate about where you want to continue to grow or push into. What are you going to continue doing this year that has made a difference? What do you want to change completely, which may be in the form of just some new habits related to mindfulness, related to working out, related to being a bit more balanced? How do you intend to be different at the end of next year? Actually set a few goals, specific goals, whether it be professional or personal development, and hold yourself accountable ultimately. Take yourself out of your comfort zone in 2021. Continue to grow. There is an invigorating energy associated with looking forward and real personal stretch and growth.
Really well put. Put yourself first. It's not always selfish to say no, is it?
Absolutely. I have had conversations just this past week with a number of clients who are using that word, and then using that word in a good way, in the sense of be more selfish around what's ultimately going to be best for you in terms of both your psychological and your physical energy. We are all tapped. We've all been tapped this year. And again, most people are really looking forward to some time off.
Absolutely.
But, you cannot be an effective leader. You can't be an effective person if you're exhausted.
No, you're right. Harold, have a wonderful Christmas on behalf of everybody here in the Sunday Cafe team and our listeners too. Thank you for your input throughout the year.